So though I've lived in Madison for over 20 years now, I grew up in Quincy, Illinois, a Mississippi River town on the western tip of Illinois, about 2 hours from St. Louis and 5.5 hours from Chicago. A few years ago, the local newspaper was sold to a corporation from a big city many states away. Concerned about the loss of local news, a few concerned citizens, including my parents, who are here today, hi Mom and Dad, yeah, launched an online newspaper, Muddy River News, tagline, "Our home, our news." Muddy River News has become the main source for Quincy and the surrounding area to get news about local elections, local government, local events, and of particular interest, local high school sports. I've seen the same creativity, spunk, and determination Muddy River News embodies with the Rural Justice Task Force. Over the past 4 years, I've had the privilege of listening to people across the country, from Alaska to Alabama, from Maine to Montana. What I've seen are people and communities not waiting for rescue, but solving problems. They're innovating every day, finding new ways to help their neighbors, to partner, to use technology, and to deliver justice and the basic needs and rights that depend on it. I've learned about solutions from community justice workers, to clinics at libraries and laundromats, to partnerships with schools and hospitals, to technological innovations that are transforming how people get legal help. Solutions that, by succeeding despite great logistical, technological, and resource challenges, have much to teach us about expanding access to justice everywhere. That's why this work matters far beyond the communities we call rural, because rural America's access to justice innovations are a blueprint for closing the justice gap nationwide. We sometimes hear the phrase, and likely will today, rural legal desert, often in reference to the lack of attorneys in many rural places. It's time to reclaim this phrase from one of scarcity to one of abundance. For deserts are anything but barren. They're vibrant, complex, and resilient. They're full of life that's adapted to thrive. And that's how I think of rural America, fertile with lessons for adapting and evolving the justice system so that it reaches everyone it is meant to serve. As we move through today's program, I invite you to hold on to that image of rural not as remote, but as resourceful, not as forgotten, but as foundational, because rural is home to the people, the partnerships, and the solutions that will help us finally realize the promise of justice for everywhere and everyone. And with that, now on to the main part of the program. We're going to engage in a myth-busting exercise, and we've talked about technological challenges in rural areas. Well, we've had one today. There was going to be a live poll, but there's an issue with that, so we're going to do old-fashioned hand raising. So are you ready for the first myth? Americans know when they need a lawyer and where to turn for help. Fact or myth? Myth? Okay. We don't even need to raise our hands. We can just scream it out. Okay, great. To talk us through this, we have Dr. Becky Sandifer, professor at Arizona State University. She's one of the nation's foremost researchers on access to justice, and I'll add, a graduate of Madison West High School and the University of Wisconsin. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
It's fun to be back. This is one of my favorite myths because it does so much work to support the status quo, which is what a good myth does if it's a good myth. But I just want to unpack two pieces of it. So think about the problems in your life that are legal, even if you're a lawyer, right? So they emerge in relationships with other people, like your neighbors and their annoying dog, or your kid, or your kid's teacher, or they emerge in relationships with like big distant things, bureaucracies, agencies, offices. And you care about them not because they're legal, but because they affect some part of your life that you care about. Normal people are just like you, right? They're not sitting around thinking, my problem getting insurance to pay for my kid's medicine is a justice issue. They're thinking, I need to get my kid's medicine. So shifting the way we think about people's experience of justice issues to the way they think about people's experience of justice issues is a really important move that lets us think about how to meet them where they are, which is one of the themes of this event. And it also starts to explain to us part of, but not all of why, if you look at what makes it to the justice system. So if you're sitting in your legal aid office or you're sitting in a court, you're overwhelmed by people you have to turn away because you can't help them, or you're overwhelmed by people who don't have attorneys to represent them in litigation and other kinds of court and hearing events. Those people are the tip of an iceberg. There may be 15%, there may be 20% of the people who have those justice issues that involve insurance and wages and having a place to live and caring for people who depend on you. So this myth does two important kinds of work that has made us design things improperly. Let's put it that way. That's a polite way to put it. So one important kind of work that it does is it makes us think that the way we think about the world, we who are providing legal solutions, is the way to think about the world. And so that blinds us from some things we know about how to connect with people effectively and accessibly. And Matthew Burnett and I sometimes call those the 4 T's, because that's easy to remember. So help is accessible and effective when it's timely, when it shows up where you are when you realize that you need it, when it's targeted to the specific thing that's actually happening to you, and framed in a way that makes sense given your experience of that thing. It's targeted to you. It's trustworthy. It comes from some person or object or entity or source that you believe means well by you. And one of the things we're learning about trustworthiness is it's not one size fits all. People have diverse experiences and diverse understandings of how the world works, and so we need to think about trustworthiness as a pretty richly textured thing. And then finally, it needs to be transparent. So people need to be able to understand, this is the kind of situation that I'm in, these are the choices that I have. If I choose door A, this might happen. If I choose door B, this might happen. The reason transparency matters is because once it's a legal issue and I start to tell you, oh, this is a demand letter, your state says you must file an answer within 11 days, I've given you legal advice. And so meaningful help requires us to give the authorization and capacity of frontline helpers to be able to do fundamental central things that help people understand the issues that they face. So that's why that 4th T is so important. So we design services around lawyers and courts and legal aid offices, but not around those 4 principles that we know help things connect to people. The other work that this myth does is it makes us design those solutions for the 15 to 20% of problems that make it to the existing system, and not think about the enormous scale that we actually have to respond to. So if 15 or 20% of problems are making it to the existing system, and I think all of us can agree they're not necessarily handled well by that existing system, but they're at least touching that existing system, that means we need 400 or 500% more touches with something that connects to law and to justice and to rights. And so we have to completely, well, let's not say completely, we have to 180 the way that we think about how we might connect with people, and we have to be honest with ourselves about the enormous scope and scale of the connections that we need to be making. And then when we do that, people can access justice and have access to their own law.
Thank you, Becky, for setting the stage so powerfully. So our next myth explores what happens when people do know they need legal help but can't find it close to home. So no scanning. You guys didn't like the raising hands part, so we'll just scream it out. Here's the next myth. When Americans need legal help, there are enough resources within reach. Myth or truth? Myth? Okay, you caught on well. Okay, great. And we have 2 speakers joining us to explore this myth. First, we'll hear from Judge Michael Zell of the predominantly rural-serving Portage County Circuit Court in central Wisconsin. And then next, we'll hear from Beth Ann Richland, Executive Director of Judicare of Legal Aid here in Wisconsin. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm Michael Zell. I'm a judge in Portage County, Wisconsin, as you've heard. We are a 3-judge county with 70,000 people. If you drew an X through the state of Wisconsin, Stevens Point is right at the intersection of those two lines. And so we are more properly really central Wisconsin than northern. But I will say that my first day of work, I was told in 2022 when I became a new judge that I was being assigned 932 cases, not including the juveniles. And so there is plenty of legal work, plenty of legal problems in central and northern Wisconsin in need of lawyers. I also think it's important to tell you a little bit about my story as a lawyer because I think it relates to the shortage of lawyer issue that we are all talking about here today. I started my career in Milwaukee, largely representing individuals who most needed legal help in family law and criminal defense and bankruptcy. But I heard this rumor in about 2005 that there was a shortage of lawyers in central and northern Wisconsin. And my wife being from Almond, Wisconsin in Portage County, we looked at the options and we moved to central Wisconsin where I started my solo practice there again. And it was true. There was plenty of work. There were plenty of people who needed legal help. But ultimately, the cost of health insurance for my growing family of 5 drove me out. And I took a government job in central Wisconsin in about 2015, and I've worked in one capacity or another for the state of Wisconsin since then. These are some of the things that affect the decisions of lawyers and where they work and what they do. And I think it's important to understand that that might be what many of the lawyers in Wisconsin are grappling with. I am happy, I am grateful that I found a way again to help individuals as a judge. There are many people that come in before the court, and judges have a great capacity to work to try to balance those scales of justice that we always talk about. That being said, there are these inconvenient guardrails called the law, and so we do have to enforce the law, and frequently, or maybe occasionally is a better word, we have to interpret the law. But a circuit court judge is largely responsible for enforcing the law. And so, I think there are a couple stories here, just like Judge Dallett told you about her most memorable case. There are often hearings in front of a circuit court judge that bring out the same kind of feelings. And so 2 most recent stories for me are these. And I'd ask you first to imagine being an 85-year-old woman or having an 85-year-old woman in court in front of you who's being sued over a debt that was incurred over 7 years ago. She signed up for a debt consolidation service because she saw something on TV about it. She went to the website and filled out some basic details and didn't really know what she was getting, which was obvious because what she was applying for was a loan. And now the person who owns the loan, who is, I think, the 3rd buyer of the loan along the chain, is in court. The lawyer there for the company is suing her and wants a judgment for $11,000 based on late fees and interest. She gets $1,200 a month in Social Security benefits. She tells you that her rent is being increased this month from $875 a month to $950. She has no assets. Her landlord is not very sympathetic to her plight. She is appearing in court by herself because she has no access to a lawyer. The lawyer for the plaintiff first asked for a default judgment at the first hearing because they filed a complaint and she never filed a written answer, which is a requirement in Wisconsin. But she did file a handwritten letter asking the judge to do certain things, and which the judge construed as an answer. And so I denied the request for a default judgment. But the lawyer then asked for summary judgment at the next hearing because he had sent her interrogatories, another procedural device in Wisconsin where you can ask discovery questions. And she never answered, and in Wisconsin, the law says that those interrogatories are then deemed answered in the way contrary to her interest. And so these are the guardrails I'm talking about. The law is very clear on some of these things, and a self-represented individual in a large civil claim has a very hard time following the parameters of the law without assistance. When I look at her and others like her in the courtroom, I see nothing but despair and hopelessness at the lack of understanding the legal system. A similar story to that, one with which Judge Dalit brought up, or an example of the domestic violence victim whose abuser is a classic abusive husband. She's a stay-at-home wife. She and I saw each other in court for the first time when she was applying for a restraining order. She'd been staying at the local shelter sponsored by CAP Services. This is a person who has been threatened for years. The abuser was threatening her and her children. Every time she would leave, he would track her. He would threaten to harm the children if she didn't come back. And finally, she got the courage to leave and go to the shelter. The shelter has the resources to assist people with preparing paperwork for a restraining order and injunction. And she filed it and then showed up to the court to find another kind of abuse, I suppose, which is that her husband, who has the paycheck and the money, is sitting there with a lawyer who understands the legal system, the rules of evidence, which do apply at an injunction hearing in Wisconsin, and the poor plaintiff in the restraining order case did not. She does not know the rules of evidence. People frequently show up in these situations with police reports or a friend who heard something or other things like that, but without a witness or other evidence that complies with the rules of evidence, that person is not likely to be successful in court. When I see her and others like her in court, there is only a combination of terror and hopelessness at the inability to manage the legal system themselves. I have seen around us in Portage County the dwindling pool of lawyers as the baby boomers have retired and there's a lack of anyone else coming in to fill the gap. What does this mean for our system? You know, we as judges perceive our role to be trying to balance the scales of justice in the courtroom so that all voices have an opportunity to be heard. And if we can't, and by we I mean humanity, the legal system, all of you, me, the judges, the lawyers, if we can't find a way that everyone in the legal system gets to have their voice heard, then I don't know what we're doing. I hope that there is some hope in all of this, and by coming here today, I believe there is. I really am amazed, I'm humbled and in awe at all the people who participated in this process and created this task force and created this report, which we've had a chance to review and think about here today. That is a reason for hope. The next speaker you'll hear from is Beth Ann Richland. She's the executive director of Judicare. She has created some excellent programs that she's providing to us in Portage County. One of those is called FLIC, the Family Law Information Center, which comes to Portage County once or twice a month, and then does it virtually also a couple times a month, listening to people's questions about family law and trying to answer those and help them fill out their forms so that they can appear in court without a lawyer. Another great program that they've started in Portage County is a small claims mediation program. And that program intervenes in the small claims system. They provide personnel every other Tuesday when we have our small claims court. And those personnel, the judge directs people to speak to the mediator. It is not a mandatory program, but people are encouraged and directed to at least speak to the mediators. And then we have had incredible success. Many eviction actions have been dismissed by stipulation or agreement of the parties rather than proceeding to an eviction. And many of you probably know that an eviction on your CCAP or court system record makes it very difficult to get in another apartment. So that's a really great benefit for the people of Portage County. And many of our simply money judgment or debt collection actions are also resolved by stipulation. That program has been remarkably successful in Portage County. And so I think those are the things that I see in my work in this area that have given me hope and a passion to keep the work alive. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to Wisconsin. We are happy to have you here.
Good afternoon. I'm Beth Ann Richland. I've been introduced a few times now. I'm the Executive Director of Judicare Legal Aid, and we are one of 2 LSC grantees in the state of Wisconsin. And we are tasked with providing equal access to justice, high-quality civil legal aid in the northern 33 counties of the state of Wisconsin, which is very rural. There are a lot of trees. It is very beautiful. It has 4 seasons. I affectionately call it the Colorado of the Midwest. I've heard that made it into the report. I didn't see it, but it is a tagline I have used to recruit people to come and work at Judicare Legal Aid. As you can imagine, not as attractive without many large cities and serving a very rural population. In addition, we do amazing work serving Native Americans statewide. We appear in all 11 tribal courts, the 33 circuit courts, 2 federal courts, administrative courts. As you can imagine, this is a bit of a lift for a law firm to be doing work across that large geographical area. And so we love to innovate and take chances. And so we are a great supporter of the Rural Justice Task Force and the work that has been done to try to outline some of those best practices and do some exciting new things. We love it. We have already know that high levels of poverty can be a major obstacle in obtaining justice, resolving your legal issue. So I'm going to tell you just a brief story about somebody who, as Becky pointed out, he figured out he had a legal issue. He knew that there could be a possible solution. So he already made it past step 1. He identified he had a legal issue. Step 2, he found us. So he found a civil legal aid lawyer. He made it through. That should be like step 2 through 10, because he had to go through intake, and then he had to be deemed a priority. And he made it through. And his case landed on my desk when I was not really practicing much anymore, when an attorney left our firm. And the case landed on my desk in 2020, and I call up Jack. And Jack is being evicted from subsidized housing in a rural community, and the courthouse is about 60 miles away. And Jack is wheelchair bound. And I said, Jack, how do you usually get to places? And he says, well, I can get Medicaid transportation. I can sometimes call a taxi. I have a friend that can sometimes take me places. And I say, all right, Jack, because we're going to need everybody in order to resolve this issue. We're going to have all these people on deck to do this. And he says, okay, Attorney Beth Ann, I believe in you. We're going to do this. Our first hearing, we drive all the way to the courthouse. Of course, they are late because they are in a transit van, and there's traffic. It's a small town, but there's traffic, trust me. And, getting up the elevator and, into the courtroom, we're a little bit late. I told the judge, or the court commissioner, actually, my client is coming, they're going to be here. We show up for, in Wisconsin, what is a 5-minute return date in a small claims action, like literally 5 minutes. I had previously asked if this could be done by phone. I had volunteered to do it by Zoom. Nope, couldn't do that. The opposing party, however, was on video, even though they were located in the city in which the courthouse was located, the attorney for the opposing party. So, it's a little little disparity there. We're gonna move past it. We got here. I'm able to meet with my client in person for the first time, right? Because I am also very far away from this gentleman. Jack had what turned out to be an extraordinary good case. I was very happy to take it on, and he was a fantastic client. But resources were very limited. Every time we needed to do something, became the social worker, trying to arrange for all of the services to be in place so that Jack could participate fully in the court proceeding. And things snowballed. We did a second appearance, there were issues of fact, the judge sent us to mediation. Could the mediation be done by Zoom? Yes, the mediation can be done by Zoom, but you and your client must be in the same place. Okay, I can drive to Jack's house. Jack does not have access to the internet, nor is there quality broadband available in Jack's neighborhood, which was a very rural area, just again. So again, we have to overcome these barriers in order to even meaningfully participate in this other way. So Jack and I won, okay? Long story short, Jack and I. We did a great job. We were able to save his housing subsidy. He is still stably housed to this day. How do I know this? Because Jack still writes to me. It is a very wonderful perk of being a civil legal aid attorney when you can be there for somebody in need. But the issues of Jack's case are definitely not unique to the cases that we see every day at Judicare Legal Aid. There are Jacks calling every day, and those cases take away time and resources from others who continue to call, and the snowball effects that continue to happen. Last week at Judicare Legal Aid, I ran a report in our online intake system. We rejected 52 people who had already overcome that barrier that Professor Sandiford talked about. They already knew they had a legal problem. They reached out to us, 52 people, and we said, we don't have the resources to help you, even though you have identified that you have a legal problem, and we have identified that we may have some advice or brief service to give to you, or some extended service. We just don't have the capacity to serve you. And that's the reality in my service area. That's the reality in many rural areas, as I learned as a member of the Rural Justice Task Force across the United States, that in my community, where I'm working every day to help as many folks as possible, I can continue to help, but in order for me to be able to reach those other 52 people a week, we need to find better solutions and more solutions. And as Rebecca pointed out, that is only a small percentage of the people who even need those solutions. So I'm setting the bar real low. We're just even trying to meet a greater need. And we have really high hopes in the state of Wisconsin that the recommendations in this report and some of the activity that will happen after its release will result in some great solutions for our state. And I thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Judge Zell and Beth Ann, for sharing your perspective and insight on the complexity of access in rural communities. You guys ready to yell out again? Do you think it's going to be myth or fact? Okay. Oh, you haven't learned. Our next myth looks at community capacity, the belief that rural areas simply lack the resources to close the justice gap. So here's the prompt, you guys, get ready. Rural America has a dearth of resources to close the justice gap. Fact or myth? Myth. To help us understand this question of resources, we have Holly Clendenin of Southwest Wisconsin Technical College. As Chief Student Services Officer, Holly oversees a comprehensive suite of student services, which includes a partnership with Law for Learners to connect students with free legal help. Southwest Wisconsin Technical College won the 2025 Aspen Institute Prize for Community College Excellence, the nation's premier award for two-year colleges, in large part due to the programs Holly oversees. Please join me and welcome Holly to the stage.
Good afternoon, I'm Holly, and I work at Southwest Tech in Fenimore, Wisconsin. And to tell you about how rural we are, we do have electrical car charging stations on campus, and then further down the parking lot, we have horse and buggy pole tie-ups for our Amish community that visit our campus. We serve about 7,000 students annually. Some of our biggest programs are in agriculture, manufacturing, and healthcare. Our district, we serve the 5 counties in the southwest corner of the state, also very beautiful, but I've not called it the Colorado of Wisconsin before. The population's about 120,000 people in those 5 counties. To give you a little bit about background on our student population, about 50% of our program students are eligible for federal Pell Grants based on their income. Our average student age is 26, so although we have a lot of students coming to us directly from high school, we also have a lot of adult students who either are reskilling themselves with a new degree or never went to college and are coming back to get a degree or credential to help increase their earning potential. In my position in student services, we are really focused on helping our students be successful in all the things that happen outside of the classroom, because we have found many of our students who don't get to that graduation stage, it's not because of the classwork, it's because of the things that happen to them when they are a student that happen outside of the classroom. And I was very honored to work on the Rural Justice Task Force. Shortly after, Southwest Tech partnered with Law for Learners in 2021 to be able to provide free legal services to our students. Through Law for Learners, students and staff can access free legal assistance. And I often hear people say that rural communities don't have the resources that many people need to navigate problems like housing, employment, or family issues. But that's not the full picture. I did find that the Wisconsin Bar has shared that the number of attorneys in the rural parts of the state has decreased by 7% over the last 4 years, but that doesn't mean the resources aren't there if local leadership is willing to work collaboratively and creatively. At Southwest Tech and at our institutions across the state, we have students who are incredibly resourceful and driven to reach their goals and improve their lives. At Southwest Tech, our students who connect with Law for Learners are primarily referred to the service by staff who we've made aware of Law for Learners and through our school communications, which are as simple as e-newsletters and monitors, TV screens we have in our hallways, letting students know about upcoming events. The primary issues that we know our students are contacting Law for Learners are about are family issues, which we've heard about, immigration, finances, name and gender marker changes, criminal records as they're navigating their new careers. They may have some things they need to work through, and housing is a very big one. When students face these challenges that threaten their education, they show up. And through Law for Learners, our students can meet with volunteer legal aids and attorneys, and very importantly, they can most often meet with these people virtually because transportation can be a huge issue for our students. There's no public transportation in Southwest Wisconsin. There's no public transportation that's going to help a student in Fenimore get to, don't worry about that, get to Madison if they don't have a car or their car is broken down or their car is impounded because they got a traffic ticket and can't afford to get it out. So that ability to help our students connect virtually has been a huge benefit to our students. Recently, we had a student who was navigating a housing dispute that was potentially going to cause her to have to drop out of college, but because of the help she received with Law for Learners, she was able to work through that housing issue, stay enrolled, and she is on track to graduate, which is our goal for all of our students who begin their program at Southwest Tech. So what I've learned through my time with Law for Learners is that rural communities don't suffer from a lack of resources or commitment. They suffer from distance and disconnection. People care deeply, but services are often fragmented or too far away. And when we bring legal aid into the trusted, familiar spaces like a college and a group, a faculty member, an advisor who knows that student, people are much more likely to seek help early before a small problem becomes a big problem that can disrupt their education or disrupt their life. So rural Wisconsin is full of hardworking, determined students who just need a fair chance to succeed. Some of them just simply need a person who's willing to listen and willing to help. And programs like Law for Learners remind us that access to justice isn't only about geography, it's about meeting people where they are, where life happens, and where services that strengthen both individuals and communities can have a big impact. Rural doesn't mean lacking, it means inventive and capable. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly, for showing us how local institutions like technical colleges can make a difference. I just have to say, somebody met Holly and also had heard that the community college had won this Aspen Prize, which is this huge national honor and award. And they said when they met Holly, they said she's why they won that award. So you can see why. Our fourth myth tackles a familiar question: who can actually help? There's a persistent belief that only lawyers can close the justice gap. You guys ready to state your opinion? Okay. Is that a myth or a fact? You got it. Okay. Here to help us challenge this idea that only lawyers can fill the justice gap is Nicole Nelson, CEO of Frontline Justice, which is working to mobilize, support, and equip trusted community advocates to become frontline legal helpers. Please join me in welcoming Nicole to the stage.
Good afternoon. So, what do we miss when we include only lawyer voices in designing the legal system? This is a question I posed to Liz Medicine Crow, a colleague of mine and the president of the First Alaskans Institute a few years ago. And her answer was quick, and it was unexpected, and it absolutely floored me. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But first, I want to give you a little bit of context about me, my community, and why we were even having this conversation in the first place. So, as Rebecca mentioned, I am the CEO of Frontline Justice, which is dedicated to bridging the nation's justice gap by empowering a new category of legal helper, the justice worker, across the nation. And I was brought on to lead this charge after spending 25 years in the field in Alaska as a staff attorney, a supervising attorney, and a longtime executive director of our only legal aid program. And my home, Alaska, which I'm very proud of, is huge. It's bigger than the next 3 states combined. That's Texas, Alaska, and Montana. It has a very small population, less than 750,000 of us. Justice Bolger and I are both here, so the population has decreased. And most of it is extremely rural. So half of the population lives in Anchorage and the surrounding area, which is where I live. And the balance of the population is spread across very remote and distant villages that can range from 30 people to maybe 1,000 is a big one. And they're mostly off the road system, which means to get into these areas, you need to fly in maybe a small plane or a snow machine, or you can go by water to some communities if the seasons are right. And it is richly diverse. It is proudly home to 229 tribal nations. There are 100 different languages that are spoken in the school district that my daughter went to school. And it's a place of just extremes: beauty, distance, geography, and weather. But the infrastructure is kind of thin. And sometimes justice can be hard to come by. And like every other legal aid organization that I know of, we were turning away one person, one of our neighbors, for everyone that we were able to serve. And again, as Becky says, and everybody else agrees with, we also know that there were so many people that weren't even coming to our doors. We, like you all, are drinking from a fire hose. And one solution, the one that's most often offered in this in response to the justice crisis is more lawyers. And I 100% agree that the fact that there are too few lawyers in a system that is built for lawyers is certainly a problem. But sticking to lawyer-only solutions, to my mind, is a bit like saying the solution to the water gushing in your face is to open your mouth wider. It's just not viable. We need to divert the flow. And so we've got a scalability problem. But aside from the scalability problem, I also think that we have another foundational problem. And this brings me back to Liz's answer to my question. What do we miss when we center lawyers instead of those most impacted in the legal system? And she said quite simply, we miss justice itself. We aren't slightly off target. We have completely missed the boat and the entire point of the exercise. And when you look at the evidence, I think she's right. So with this in mind, our community came together under the leadership of our Supreme Court, committed to the idea that addressing our community's access to justice crisis required us to move beyond lawyer-only solutions. And we began to imagine systems anew. We started by trying to understand our ecosystem. We wanted to understand where the lawyers were. No surprise, they were along the road system. But also not only where the lawyers weren't, but what resources our communities had, what they could add to the soup, and how we could blend something together that can meet needs. And this in turn led us to seek out a medical legal partnership because we learned that the tribally operated healthcare system had the biggest footprint within our state. Down to that small village, there was a community health center or health aide in every village. And so we thought, well, maybe we can, join forces and see if we could solve this problem. And this turned out to be transformative because we learned that the healthcare system was 40 years ahead of us in thinking about how to address these very same issues of scale. They had built out a full range of different healthcare providers, all trained to perform various procedures. And so we decided that we would try to build out the justice analog of the community health aid program. We developed targeted training programs that were specific to problems our communities were facing. They were low-hanging legal fruit, where simple legal problems had been left unaddressed but had escalated into big problems for the communities. And the model is showing really great promise. Alaska Legal Services has trained and supported hundreds of community justice workers. They're in 42 different communities, most of which are off the road system. And we have just learned, thanks to the research of Becky and Matthew, that they drew down $23 million in SNAP benefits that otherwise would not have been distributed. So have you ever been helped by a community health aide? Have you seen another first responder like a paramedic or an EMT in action? Can you imagine our healthcare system without them? Community justice workers aim to be the justice equivalent of these crucial actors in the healthcare system. They're ordinary people in a wide variety of trusted roles within their community who are trained and supported to provide simple legal help on issues that otherwise go unmet. They're oftentimes the people that people turn to with their life problems. And the fact that they are drawn from the communities that they're serving oftentimes means they're closest to the problems and they are trusted by those who are seeking help. And this idea is catching fire across the lower 48. There are 11 jurisdictions that have authorized or are in the process of authorizing justice worker programs, and 20 more in the wings. And recently, our friends at the American Bar Association and the National Conference of State Supreme Court Justices passed resolutions encouraging jurisdictions to look into these type of programs. And I know, some of you may worry. What happens if it goes wrong? Our clients' lives are hard enough. We don't want to create a two-tiered system of justice with those with more resources get something better than the rest. And I hear you. Our clients deserve only the best. But I believe this is better justice. This is the gold standard. Everyone in our country should have access to right-size, on-demand, effective legal help from a trusted source right when they need it. And I'm not afraid to try something new because the weight of this injustice is crushing us all. And can you imagine if it worked? Can you imagine if everyone was empowered to know and use the law? I can. I dream of a day when justice not only flows like a river, but it permeates the atmosphere like the air that we breathe, universally and equally available to everyone. And I believe the only way we're going to get there is to include all those who are closest to the problems in the solution. So I invite you to come with me into that future. Will you join me?
Wow, these speakers are amazing, aren't they? Yeah. I'm just going to go off script for a minute and just say I feel so blessed to be part of this conversation and in this room with all of you, the speakers, but everyone sitting here. Yes, so thank you, everybody.